It's Jack Davis. I called the meeting of the Finance and Budget Committee to order on Cinco de Mayo to address the budget and other matters. I need somebody to move item 2110, consideration and action on a special appropriation of $2,630 from the unassigned fund to the capital fund, better known as Reserve Fund for Capital Non-Recurring Expenses. Do I have somebody move that? Lisa. Who's the second?
Stacy.
Okay. I want to just cover a couple things associated with this because I think it's important that we have an understanding of what the unassigned fund balance is and the general fund, because there's been several statements made during the course of the year. Basically, the policy says that a fund balance should not be excessive. Minimal unassigned fund balance should be maintained at not less than 12% of the budgetary general fund revenues. And it should be used, it should be reserved for special or unanticipated expenses, special or unanticipated capital projects, or refunding of debt. There's 4 types of capital classifications, fund classifications: restricted, which is like our bond fund; committed, which is the Reserve Fund for Capital Non-Recurring Expenses; assigned, that's basically our, and then unassigned is where everything else goes that doesn't fall into those 3. Per policy, the RTM should be very cognizant of its unassigned fund balance, as it's difficult for things to come out. It should be, and use of it for such things as an operating budget to reduce a proposed operating budget is frowned upon by the credit rating agencies. Essentially, the unassigned fund balances are not an ATM for known but unbudgeted expenses nor recurring expenses. And it should be noted that any Board of Finance action or use of unassigned fund balances does require RTM approval. So I sent out a chart earlier, which I think we're going to use. To begin the year, and I'm going to use round numbers, we had about $25.5 million in the unassigned fund balance, which represented 17.3% of the revenues. There were drawdowns for the Park and Rec concession for $9,200 and approximately $1.8 million for the Board of Ed special appropriation, which brought us down to 16% or $23.7 million. During the normal course of budget, projected year-end activity is done. So that revenue surplus is estimated to be $1.6 million. Town operating budget surpluses of about $800, and Board of Ed operating surplus of about $1 million, coming to $3.4 million, which is very high typically, but this is not a typical year. I just wanted to go through some of the high levels of what comprise this, because I am going to be reporting on basically what the financial status of this year has been as of the date. So about $742,000 of the surplus revenue is based upon tax collections, because the Board of Finance chose to use the Great Recession rate versus the consistent rate, and we're collecting at a consistent rate. Park and Rec, they've blown revenues out of the water. It's at an all-time high and over 215% greater than 2019. Town clerk revenue, based upon the housing and refinancing boom, has generated almost $1 million of projected revenue. And then the town received about $340,000 in grants. There have been some shortfalls on the revenue. Building and fire marshal inspections are down by about 500 and 110 respectively. Parking revenue is down 74, youth services by 144, solid waste tipping is off by 188, and the sewer fund this is an adjustment because we've drawn down that fund, and from now on we'll be just getting what the amount is from the annual. So that comprised generally the 1.6 million. On the projected 800,000 coming in from the town, health department's up, as one would expect, by 40,000. Police are down primarily due to lower overtime and vacancies. That's about 330. Park and Rec, we're going to be dealing with this at our next June meeting, is up about 250,000. That's basically to service the 650,000 in incremental revenue. Youth services and senior centers are down in their expenses, all because of COVID, of 150,000, 115,000, and unused contingency will range between 150 to 200,000, and then a myriad of other expenses brought it down by about 260,000. As for the Board of Ed, as of March 30th, the two main drivers are an increase in the budgeted ECR to about 375,000 due to the state's reimbursement rate increasing to 80.3% from what we had budgeted at 75, as well as use of ESSER 2 grant monies of about 595,000. Again, remember these are projections, and I would suspect that the revenue for the town will be increasing, and that might be offset by a reduction of the expected $1 million from the Board of Ed as of March 30th. I wanted to say is that when we get done adding this up, the town ends up with about 27.1 million, representing 18.4% of the revenues associated with the 21 budget. They therefore felt that they could transfer $2,785,630 to the capital account, which is going to be used to basically pay off all capital requests for the years that is bonded in conjunction with the capital reserve. That will still leave the town post July 1st with $24.3 million, representing almost 16% of the fiscal year 22 revenues, and approximately $6 million in excess of the 12% minimum. Are there any questions or discussions on this item? Stacy, is anybody's hand raised?
Nope, I don't see anybody's hand raised.
Are we ready to vote?
I see nodding heads.
Okay, yeah, good. Are there any no votes? Any abstentions? Hearing none, I will take that this was a unanimous vote. Mike, how many people do we have here that's making this unanimous?
14, Jack.
Thank you. Need that for our report. Okay. Give me a second, because I was so organized in losing my internet that I've misplaced one of my budget items. Okay. Next on the agenda, discuss and take action on 21-12, appropriation of $30 million for the refunding of certain town bonds and authorizing issuance of refunding bonds to finance such appropriation. Do I have somebody move that motion?
I see Beth and Louisa.
I have Mike. Okay. All right, good enough. This is a consistent motion that we make every year that eliminates all prior authorizations. This allows essentially the Board of Finance to go and refinance any bond opportunities where the present value savings to the town is greater than what we have, and they do not need to come back to the RTM for these. It covers the bonds from 2012 through 2020, I believe, and it's a consistent one every year. Is there any questions on this motion?
Question. Is there guidance as to what the present value savings target is? Like, is there a minimum threshold that the team? None. They can do it at any level.
That's correct. So yes, they have not established the guidance. If they are looking at something, it most probably will be discussed at a Board of Finance meeting, so we would know basically what that is. They still have to vote on it in public. Any other questions? That's not a bad idea for them to have, but to answer your question, to the best of my knowledge, no. Are we ready to vote?
I see nodding heads.
Are there any votes? Okay.
Yes.
Any no votes? Any abstentions?
Jenny.
I abstain.
One. I know. That's why I asked that on these. All others are in favor. Are we still at 14? So that has 13 in favor.
That's correct.
I feel good. I at least still have crayons in the house. Okay. Discuss and take action on 21-13, consideration and action on appropriation of $762,000 for the 2021 sidewalk repair and replacement project, and authorizing the issuance of bonds and notes in the amount of $762,000 to meet said obligation.
I'll move it.
Do I have somebody move? James moving, and who else?
Stacy.
Seconded. Do I have a second? Somebody raise their hand. I think Michael second.
I'll second it.
Okay, I'm going to cover 2013, 14, and 15, one aspect of it at all times. As we go through the next three bonding issues, the original request for the sidewalks was $750,000, for the Royal Roof, $850,000, and for the homes HVAC, $300,000. It is estimated that the bond servicing is going to be $30,000, and that bond servicing was broken up as $12,000 to the sidewalks, $13,000 to the roof, and $5,000 to the home's HVAC. That's why when we're going through these, you're going to see that the numbers aren't exactly what the capital was. Jenny did some really good work for us, and Mark had a letter at one time asked, and we've now included. It's estimated that with bonding the $762,000, the estimated annual increase to debt service will be approximately $46,000. There will be a premium, so we can address the de minimis clause, of about $56,000, and the total estimated interest over the life of the sidewalks bond approximates $100,000. Are there any questions on this bonding resolution? Any hands?
I don't see any questions. My only comment is I think we need more sidewalks in town, and we need to have a shoveling policy.
We do have a shoveling policy.
We do not enforce it. And with more kids walking to school, it's dangerous.
We need a revised shoveling policy.
Okay. That we can raise, but we do have a shoveling policy, and there is a fine associated with that. Whether or not they're enforcing it might be something else. That we can bring to the first selectman's and attention, as well as to Frank Kemp, who handles our ordinances.
Martha Banks's hand is raised.
Yeah, and I've mentioned it before. Until last year, this has always been a yearly maintenance item, and I think it's wrong to bond for a maintenance item that's done every year. If you're going to bond sidewalks, you might as well bond, the roads too. So I'm going to vote against this, but we're going to pay $100,000 extra and we're kicking the can down the road for future expense. People that are budget in the future.
Martha, the one thing, because I did raise this question to Kate and Ed, and unlike certain repairs, is that it's my understanding that for the next 3-4 years there's a major project underway where these sidewalks are being totally ripped out and totally replaced. So while I agree with you, it's because of that I can rationalize in my own mind why we're bonding these, where otherwise I would at it.
Is there a way of separating repair from replacement? Because what you're describing, and I've seen it, underway, is something that looks like a very long-term thing. We're putting down, sidewalks that clearly are going to last for the next 10, 15 years, and that's much more of a capital project than, when you combine that with sidewalk repair, which I do agree is a could be an annual thing.
At this time, I do believe there was some sidewalk repairs in the capital for just repairs. This is primarily a total rip out and reinstalling, from what I have been told. So at this time, I don't have the numbers that we could separate it out. Are there any other? I will put in both those comments when we discuss this. I did want to say that what I'm basically going to do is deal with the financials. I will add the comments that were made in our committee, but for the details on all three of these, Public Works can make the comments. Is going to deal with the details on the sidewalk repair and replacement. And then RTM Education can deal with Royal School roof and the HVAC details. I'm not going to get into it. Other than, like saying, well, I'll say it when we get to the next one. So are we ready to vote?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone want to say no? Anyone?
Have Martha? Anybody else? I have one nay, Jack.
Okay. Any abstentions?
Me. Jenny.
Who?
Jenny Schwartz.
Jenny, okay.
Oh, yeah, that's right, because we're dealing with bonds. I'm sorry. Unless somebody else is going to abstain, I am going to not ask abstentions for this and that because Jenny will be abstaining. So that way she doesn't have to do it every time. That leaves 12 in favor. Mike, if I'm not mistaken?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Discuss and take action on 2114, consideration and action on appropriation of $863,000 for the Royal School roof replacement and authorizing the issuance of bonds and notes in the amount of $863,000 to meet said appropriation. Do I ask somebody to move that, please?
Stacy moves.
2 seconds.
Got it. Who else? I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Basically, on this situation, they need a new roof. The estimated annual increase to debt service is $51,000. Estimated premium is $64,000, and the total interest over the life of this bond, whenever they issue it, is estimated to be $227,000. Any comments on it?
I don't see anybody.
Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
Are there any no's? Hearing none, we have one abstention. Everybody else is voting yes. So we're 13-1. Homeschool, HVAC. Can I have somebody move 21-15, consideration and action on appropriation of $305,000 for the homeschool HVAC system design project and authorizing the issuance of bonds and notes in the amount of $305,000 to meet said appropriation?
I see Beth and Lisa.
Super, that works for me. My only comment is this is the front part of the HVAC. The cost of implementing the HVAC, I promise, is going to be a lot more than $305,000. This may be rolled into one of the school projects that's going on. Don't know about it at the time, but right now, by authorizing this bond amount, it can be rolled into the second bond for the actual work that's being done. Any discussion on this? Hearing none, are we ready to vote? We have one abstention. Is there any no's? Hearing none, I'm assuming we're unanimous. Comment on 2116, consideration and action on the town of Darien easement to Eversource doing business at CL&P for the Oxford School. We are signed this, but after a brief conversation with Kip, there's no financial impact. So we have withdrawn any participation in this report. We will be reporting enough without having this one. So I made that comment. I've informed Seth that we're not reporting. Discuss and take action on 2117, consideration and action on the newly negotiated Ariane and the Public Works Employee Union effective July 1st, 2020 and expiring June 30th, 2023. Again, I will remind everyone that we are not voting to accept, we're voting not to reject. This covers both Public Works employees and I believe 5 Park and Rec employees. Let me get my little cheat sheet. I sent out the confidential document from Kate that they were kind enough to provide to us prior to the Board of Selectmen voting because they understood that we're in the middle of budget and there's a lot of things going on. So I want to thank Kate for doing that, and I want to thank everyone for maintaining this in the confidential nature that we were requested to do. Wages are increasing. Well, actually, since this is covering the year past, employees will be paid out. There has been a reserve to cover this, but the general salary increase would be 2.25 for 2020, a quarter for 21, and 2.5 for 22. There's increases in the health insurance. I think the big thing here was the start of another phase. A number of years ago, remember these are 3-year cycles, we were able to cap the amount that somebody could earn in the defined benefit plan. But there was agreement after we capped it that there was no pension action to be done during the next contract. Have expired, so we are now going, and so any new employee will be part of a defined contribution pension plan as opposed to a defined benefit. Kudos to the town for initiating that, and it's 5-year cliff vesting. I think that's probably the most important part of this plan, of this contract. Is there any conversation or discussion on this item? Hearing none, are we ready to vote not to reject? Are there any no votes? Are there any, are there any abstentions? Hearing none, I'm going to
Jack,
assume that
we need to move in second.
Oh, we didn't move it and second it? I thought we did. Okay.
Louisa, I see Louisa, and I'll second it.
Thanks, Stacy. Okay.
Can we now vote, since we didn't move it before, and I don't want anybody to challenge whether or not we are adhering to Robert's Rules of Order, or disorder, whichever it may be. So there's no votes, there's no abstentions, and it passes unanimously. We're still at 14, I believe.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. This brings us to the fun part of the evening. Not bad. We got rid of the rest of it in half an hour. So, I need somebody to move in general 2111 consideration action on the July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022 budget recommendation by the Board of Finance. And we're going to start with item A. I need somebody to move that item.
So moved. And I see Lisa seconding.
Okay, item A is discuss and take action on the appropriation from the reserve fund for capital non-recurring expenditures for $3,279,023. I want to, which I will be covering in my remarks, and I'll say it here. I'm a big fan of the Bloomberg Technology Show that Emily Chang happens to be the host. She's extremely entertaining and bright, and animated in her interviews. And she's interviewing the CEO of Bank of America. And during the time when he was talking, instead of comparing what the first quarter results were to 2020, he was going back to 2019, stating that that was a more appropriate measure to judge where they were. And I thought about it, and I think based upon the fact that this is such an anomaly year, that it's important that we do that. So I've done a lot of different calculations, and I'm still doing them on the 2-year compound annual growth rate, comparing, not only doing the year-to-year comparison, but also giving what the fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 22 increases. And it does have some significant changes in the numbers, and I think it's more consistent with how we do things. I also will not be in our overview spending a lot of time on the mill rate. I will be going back and reconciling what both of the boards requested for their budgets, and doing a comparison on that, because I do believe that that's where we can control what's going on, because we don't control the denominator of the mill rate, which is the grand list, which is market driven. So what we do control is how much are you asking for in capital, how much are you asking for in operations. And if I compare that year to year, regardless of how the Board of Finance chose to pay for it, it's a pretty good comparison. So that brings me back to the appropriation for the reserve fund for capital. As we covered earlier, but we will actually cover later in the meeting, there was $1.9 million of funds bonded. On this transaction, what's happening here is essentially because of the contribution from the unassigned fund balance, as well as the $1 million being contributed from the capital reserve, there is no capital in this budget this year. It's zero. So the only thing we're doing is authorizing the appropriation, but the 3.2 million is for expenditures, and you have to also add in the revenues associated in the reserve fund. But that's for the authorization to spend the money, but it's not included, as it has typically been in the past, in the amounts that we're taxing. That being said, the 2.8 million is really returning monies that we have already taxed our taxpayers for, and we're giving it back to them. The 1 million that we're giving back out of the capital account is another $1 million that the taxpayers has already paid. We're aware that this year, I think we did, F&D did a phenomenal job. We were able to make our points on several issues. We finally were able to clean up in conjunction with the Board of Finance, or we were allowed to participate, cleaned up the capital accounts. And there were a number of accruals and projects that all of a sudden were getting done, or the accruals were being drawn down and projects were being used, and the rest are being closed. The town maintenance renovation account will now be $35,000, and it will be funded from the capital reserve in the future. So that generated about 1.6 being returned. There was a lot of money returned. In addition, there was 1.8 million returned from the fire apparatus accrual account. They still withheld about 1.3 million for a fire engine that's currently on order, but we typically takes 18 to 24 months before we receive delivery, and that's probably when chips were available. If there's a lot of chips that are available, it may take us longer now. But we're hopeful that next year the Board of Finance considers bonding for that, which would free up another $1.3 million to pay down more capital in next year, the following year's budget. In addition, we did and kudos to Jenny, we did a great job in showing that the accruals for fire engines did not make financial sense, and it supported the position of the Board of Selectmen. We also had a reduction of $164,000 for the Public Works vehicle accrual, because the accounting principle of consistency says that similar items should be treated the same, and since we were not accruing for the Board of Ed, Park and Rec, police, fire engines, and half of the public works vehicles, it probably made sense not to accrue for that. And so the Board of Finance graciously removed that from the budget as well. That brings us to a discussion of capital. Basically, that's going to be what we will be reporting on unless there's something else. And then the departments in that can report on the capital for the Board of Ed and any of the departments that are going on. Do I have a conversation on capital from anyone?
I have a question.
Sure.
Well, at our last meeting, one of the capital items that came up that there was some discussion about, I just didn't know where we stood as a committee, is on the Edgerton capital expenditure for $75,000. And I thought that should be clarified as a committee. I still have a lot of questions around it, and I'm not convinced that this is the right time, or really more, it wasn't the right process by which we got there. There's still I have a lot of outstanding questions, so I was hoping there would be more clarity from the Board of Selectmen. And I appreciated the letter that Laura Mosier, who is a resident, former RTM member, she submitted a letter to our committee, which I thought was very thoughtful, and kind of was more of the plan that made more sense. But again, I think that was her ideas, which was great, but I don't, that's not who controls the project. So I'm curious to see what that thinks.
I'm just
Bob Lyons' hand is up.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jack. Or is it okay if I'll just quickly say,
Go ahead.
I agree with Jenny. And listen, I'm the rookie on this, so I still feel like I'm ignorant on this project. And in addition to not knowing everything and not as clear on the process, I really worry about projects where there is uncertainty that, for whatever reasons, those kind of projects seem to attract expenses in the future that we end up paying just because we didn't really know why we were doing them in the beginning. So that's my issue as well.
Okay, so
Martha's hand is up.
From my perspective, I think the Edgerton project was not properly presented from the get-go. All right, I do agree that it was appeared to be added in, and there was some discussion of what's going to go on in Edgerton. But in this particular case, I think you have to look back on what happened at Edgerton. And then what this project really is. Back about 7-8 years ago, when Carl Kildorf was still our town administrator, and after numerous attempts to try and pass this property over to the Board of Ed, the town finally decided to demolish the old senior center. $300,000 was put into that project, and I'm telling you, this is 8-9 years ago. Now, one of the things that we talked about in the past is that the town had a very good reputation of value engineering things out of a project from the initial specs when we ran out of money. Instead of coming back and saying, hey, we ran out of money, we need some more to complete the original specs. And thereafter, it typically costs us more. One of the examples I use is that my daughter, and actually Jamie's daughter as well, were in the freshman class that entered the new high school. She's now 32? No, 31. All right? And about 3 years ago, they finally put in the soundproofing in the auditorium that they value engineered out when they were building that building. Edgerton is a similar example. When they were doing the demolition, lo and behold, in this older building, they found asbestos. Go figure, surprise. They ran out of money. If you walk the property, you still see some of the foundation of the old building still there. You see trees that have splits in them. They didn't have enough money to go and do the proper grading that they were supposed to do to begin. Add on that when my eldest, who's 36, with Mike's and Barry's son graduated from Darien High School, there were about 200 kids in that graduating class. We've seen tremendous growth in Middlesex in that, and traffic going to Middlesex is rather substantial, so parents are driving in the back way where the buses are going, dropping off their kids so that they can walk to school and not put up traffic, as well as there's kids who live on Edgerton and that side of town who do not have buses that are walking in the back way to get to Middlesex. This is finishing the demolition project and taking care of the potential safety hazards that are on that property and just fixing it so that it's good. It is not a determination or a discussion of what it's going to be used for. There's no money in this to do that, and there will be ample time to discuss that going forward. It is for that reason that we can look and discuss about what's going to happen as long as we want. It has nothing to do with this project. If you're expecting the Board of Selectmen to say that, they didn't. They didn't discuss the project right the first time. So that's just my take on it. I've walked the property by myself. I've also walked it with Matt. And it's an interesting walk there when you see what's still in the ground. So, for those that are concerned that they want to know what's going on, this isn't that project.
Jack, if I may jump in here, I understand what you're saying, but I think and I'm inclined to vote for the project because there's a need there. There's a need to be fixed. Something needs to be fixed, and my concern is exactly what you said, which is why hasn't this been explained properly by the people who are asking for it? And I think, and I say this not just in this is sort of a theme we've seen this year. Even at the beginning of the budget process, we were asking on the education side for a theme of this year's budget, and how does this budget work, and what are being asked for, and why. And this is in a microcosm the same issue. And I think that there are many things that we'd like to support, but we'd really like just a good answer and have somebody who's asking for the money can't come even before the committee or at their own meetings on the record, state what the history is. And in this case, you know what? Somebody made a mistake years ago in not taking care of the problem right first time. We're spending extra money and wasting money in some sense through extra spending to fix it. So just come and tell us what the story is, and we'll be happy to support it. So it sounds like there's a genuine need to be addressed.
Right. In certain cases.
Martha Banks's hand is up.
Yeah, I just want to remind you that this project, you talked about value engineering, but recall this project overran its budget by over $1 million. This land has sat in this state for several years now. I thought Lisa Yarnell made a good comment at one meeting. What happens if we do nothing for a year and instead spend the time determining what's the best use for this property? So we're assured that we are not going to be spending $75,000 only to find 2 or 3 years down the road that we want to build a fish academy there or something like that. So I think, I'm not averse to, doing something with this property. In fact, I'd like to, but I think there could be some real thought behind it. I'm just concerned that spend the money, and who knows, we could determine to use it in a way this expenditure was really a waste of money.
Well, since the project is to remove the loop so parents can't be doing it in some of that parking area up front, to take down some trees that actually split in it. There's a pine tree that has a split right in there, and it's right off from where the cottage is. And people the kids go walking, you can see the path, and then they go up the big hill. You can see the two ways, the Y that's created as kids climb up about a 20-foot incline on the side of where the buses are. I don't think that the expenses that they're putting in here for $75,000 is doing anything other than making it safe. It's not changing how it's going to be. It's just cleaning up the mess that's there and making it safe for people that walk there.
Well,
and for that reason is why I'm in favor of it. And I don't think it changes or will affect anything that's going on. They may not decide what's going on there for another 3 to 4 years.
I have a question. You mentioned safety, and we look to our police department and we rely on them on safety. I have not heard any safety concerns until the last minute when people heard that this committee was looking at this line item. So
the safety concern is not because of police safety. Not everything is police. Walk on that area and see what they're walking across. You have to see what's still there that shouldn't be there. You have to see the trees really should be taken down that aren't being taken down. And so that, in my opinion, is the safety. And I don't think we've to our police, however good they are, looking around and telling us what trees should come down. So I think
I see Lisa and Mike's hands up.
Mike, go ahead.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Jack, thank you, Martha, for recalling that I said that. But I have an even more concern now than I did before, because we've been proven correct once before when we wanted to look at the beach cooking concession area, didn't have the right amount of information and put it on hold. That when the reality came back and we got the right amount of information, the vote would have been incorrect. And so I just feel that we just don't have enough data here. And Jack, honestly,
I tell you, wait, Lisa, I'm cutting you off. That is not a correct statement. We have passed on from Ed Gentile a series of detailed expenses that he had. We did not have that on the beach concession. I passed on the emails from Ed to Kate to us. I also have another detailed analysis that shows what they intend to spend it on. This is not the same situation, and stating that is just totally, unfortunately, and I don't mean to sound attacking, but it's just not true. This, we have detailed expenses. This much for dirt, this much for grading, this much for tree removal. So that information it has there and at a high level has been given out. So I'm just, that's just not true.
Mike Heights wanted to talk.
They're not the same.
Yeah, just acknowledging the comments, I think, from Martha and the others about a larger plan to consider. I'm still persuaded to vote in favor because I view this largely as a remediation effort to fix up and clean up a project that's 8 or 9 years old. I am, in that regard, as a remediation matter, I'm driven primarily out of safety and hazard issues that it might be a matter of public health, also as well as for the school children crossing that property. So that's the reason why I'm going to vote in favor.
Iris?
I just want to acknowledge that the numbers that Ed Gentile gave us, and he's very good at his numbers, he specifically states it's a rough estimate, and that there's been no contract work bid out on it, and he's assuming that the town is going to cut the trees, and he also thinks that there might be some T&Z that has to be approved to it. So it's still a little loosey-goosey. And Ed's really good with numbers, so I'm not saying I don't even know whether it's far off or not, but he specifically states it's a rough estimate. And the stuff that you sent us, Jack.
I'm going to make a motion to cut $75,000 for the Edgerton Street capital project, and have them come back to us once they go through the process and get all the information.
I'll second.
Are we ready to vote?
On which?
On a motion to reduce 75,000 from the capital projects. Okay. We're just cutting. We can't tell them to come back to us. So it's either an up or a down.
No, I'm cutting the line item for Edgerton specifically. That's my motion.
I understand what you're cutting, but we can't inform them to come back to us with better numbers.
Correct.
So, all right, are we ready to vote? Mike, do you mind doing a roll call on this one?
Sure. Let me do a roll call on this. Hold on, please. Barry?
No.
Martha?
I support moving the 75.
Okay. This is a vote to cut. Okay. Martha supports.
Right.
Louisa?
I support the cut.
You support the cut, okay.
Yes.
Jack?
No.
Myself, I'm a no. James?
No.
Elizabeth?
Me, right? Yes.
Yeah, Elizabeth? Beth?
Yes.
Is that a no or a yay?
That is a
Yay
yes.
or a nay, Beth?
A yay.
Okay, thank you. Got it. Bob? Bob Lyons?
Yay.
That's a yay, okay. Iris?
Yay.
I can't hear you, Iris.
Yay.
A yay, okay. Peter?
No. Is it no?
No? Oh, yes. Jenny?
Yay. I support
Jenny?
that. Yay. I support
Okay.
that.
Yes. Bill?
No.
Bill Smith?
No.
Okay. And Lisa?
I support the cut.
Lisa? You
Yes.
support the cut? Okay. All right. So let me just count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 7 yays and 6 no's.
Hmm.
Yeah. The motion to cut carries.
I thought we have 14 people. Is there somebody who did not vote?
6 no's.
Okay, wait.
I
I'm
did not.
You didn't call me, but I assume you knew that I was a yay.
Okay. Who's speaking?
We got to that number.
That was Stacy. I assume you knew I was a yay, but you didn't call on me.
Okay, Stacy. Okay, I'm sorry. So that would be 8 yays and 6 no's.
Okay, I will
That's
write
the missing one.
give it to pass it around for why you were proposing, or I'll tell you, and since I have to do this report, I would appreciate somebody who made the motion to give me the rationale for why they're proposing this cut that I have to read. I will be giving a minority report. Stacy, it's yours.
Oh, you want it now? You don't.
Motion?
I think it was obvious why I made the motion. I think all of my.
I need to have the rationale.
Okay.
From the 8 people who.
You need us to send it to you?
When I'm making the motion on the floor of the RTM, I can give the rationale for why that was done. And it will have to be at the what you call it, and the minority report that I'll write. Or I can write it and people can just say they agree with it. But okay. Moving on, is there anything else in capital that we want to discuss? So this is an interesting thing. As I had mentioned earlier, I can modify the motion that's on the floor to reduce it by $75,000. This will have no effect on the mill rate since everything is zeroed out. What it will be doing is transferring an additional $75,000 into the capital reserve if it passes the RTM. So let me have an amendment to 2111A. Be it resolved that an appropriation of $3,204,000 and $23 is hereby made from the reserve, from the capital and non-recurring expenditures for the purpose of meeting expenses the town of Darien as shown by the budget this day approved. Do I have a second? Oh, I see James. Do I have a second on that, rather? I have James moving. Do I have a second? Iris has a second. Are there any, so now we're going to take a vote on the overall budget. Are there any no's? I'm coming down as a no on taking that amount. I'll tell you, so I'll say it's based upon the fact that I don't think that the 75,000 should have been done. So I'm voting no. Are there any other no's? Mike, are you voting no?
Yes.
Okay, so we have 2 no's. Any abstentions? Hearing none. The remaining 12, I believe, are voting in favor of the revised amount. Next
That's
on
correct.
the agenda item. I need somebody to move that an appropriation of $46,103 is hereby made in the general
46 million?
Yeah, 46 million. I'm sorry, 100,131 is hereby made in the general fund for the selectmen's operating budget. Do I have a motion to move that?
I see Lisa and
Do I have a second?
Gary.
Lisa, second. Any discussion? Again, I'm going to get some top level numbers on this. Let me get my sheets. Sheet. That was the one I was looking for before. Sorry, I gotta pull up a sheet. When I look at the Board of Selectmen, they're including the library grant. The increase is 3.72%, consisting of the Board of Selectmen increasing by as adopted to fiscal year 22. The 2-year increase, and this is both the Board of Selectmen and the library, is 2.9%. Also included in this number is the debt service of the town, Board of Ed and Sewer. And while it appears that the total debt service is increasing by 14% this year, I have to remind everyone that in 2021 we paid down a significant amount of debt, which is accounting for why that increase has occurred. But if I look at the 2-year compound annual growth rate for debt for the town, it's actually a decrease of 3.4%, going from 10,676 to 10,163 in the current fiscal year. So that's a good example of where the numbers significantly change when we do a 2-year comparison. Again, capital is 0 on this amount, so it's not transferring in. So, any conversations on the Board of Selectmen budget, the library grant, or debt? Hearing none, are we ready to vote on the Board of Selectmen budget?
Yep.
Okay. Are there any no votes? Are there any yes votes? I'm sorry, the abstentions. Sorry. Hearing none, the Board of Selectmen budget passes 14-0. That brings us to the Board of Ed budget. And somebody move, I resolved that an appropriation of $106,624,199 is hereby made in the general fund in the education operating budget. Do I have somebody move that budget?
I see Barry and Lisa.
That's good. Barry moved it, Lisa seconded. In looking at this budgeted number, again, we're not going to report a lot on the budget itself. We're secondary, so for the most part, I expect the Education Committee to give a detailed summary to which we can basically say we either agree or don't agree. What is interesting is that if I do a comparison of last year to this year, the increase is $4,127,821, or an increase of about 6.3. If I do a comparison of fiscal 2020 to fiscal year 22, their increase is 3.2%. And knowing that there were adjustments made last year, some of which were then filled in, that does reflect some of that increase we're seeing this year. Any comments or questions or desires or motions or anything along that line on the education? Remembering that we can only propose a lump sum and they get to figure out what they cut. Hearing none, I'll be ready to vote. Okay, I see a couple heads nodding. Are there any no's? No votes. Are there any abstentions? No abstentions. We take it that this passes 14-0. Now,
That's correct.
item D. If we were meeting in person, we would do this by acclamation. Since I need somebody to move item D, resolve that the total of adding B plus C equals $152,724,330 for the purposes of meeting the expenses of the town of Darien for the fiscal year commencing July 1st, 2021 and ending June 30th, 2022, as shown by the budget this day approved. Since I'm assuming we add, and I'm assuming nobody's going to vote no or abstain from adding, just everybody yell aye and we can pass this one on. 1, 2, 3.
Aye.
Aye.
Great, I heard 4 individuals are going for that. Okay. That brings us to the mill rate. And I want to get to my chart on that. I've done a couple of, I've done an extra analysis that I believe I sent out on 2111E. So I need somebody to move, resolve that a tax of 60.84 mils is hereby levied upon the last complete grand list of the town with a total net assessment of $8,629,179,265 on the property of October 1st, 2020, payable in 2 equal semi-annual installments. The first installment to become due and payable on July 1st, 2021, and the second installment to become due and payable on July 1st, 2022, provided, however, that 1, any taxpayer may pay both of said installments on July 1st, 2021, and the personal property tax on motor vehicles in said town shall become due and payable in 1 single installment on July 1st, 2021. And lastly, 3, any property tax in any amount not in excess of $100 shall become due and payable in a single installment on July 1st, 2021. Do I have a motion to move?
I'll motion.
Beth, you had it. But that's who seconded.
Stacy.
That's fine, thanks. Just like pulling teeth there. All right. So I saw a comparison that I sent out, and I believe we're going to try and have this shown on the board. There's a couple things that have occurred this year in determining the mill rate. First is the calculation for how we get there. The unadjusted grand list increased by $61 million. There are adjustments that decrease it based on state and local tax relief, and that increased by $300,000, but totals $39 million. That brings us to the adjusted grant of $8 billion, $589,706,259. The big difference between this year and last year is the Board of Finance determines the collection rate for the last 5 completed years. So regardless of what we're collecting in 2021, that's not in the calculation. It would be 2016, 17, 18, 19, and 20, what the collection rates are. And then we reduce that amount by about 25 basis points, or they reduce the amount by 25 basis points, to account for any changes in the grand list, which do occur, as well as the actual collection rate. It gives a little bit of, I want to say, flexibility there. And it equals it, because it's 25 basis points on $8.6 billion, it ends up being about $400,000, so probably about $300,000 for the year. Last year, the Board of Finance chose to use the Great Recession rate, which was a collection rate of 98.91. Where had they continued the formula, it would have been 99.44. This year, the actual collection rate is 99.445. When you multiply the collection rate towards the adjusted grand list, even though the grand list grew by 61 million, the grand list adjusted for the collection rate grew by $106 million. When you calculate out, you then take what the combined budgets were, which in our case is $152,724,000. You reduce revenue from that, and in fact, revenue is going down by about $900,000 from fiscal year 21 to 22. It comes up with the amount of taxes needed to be raised, which is $143,819,222, which, when divided by the grand list adjusted for the collection rate, gives us a mill rate of 16.84. I'm looking for one other chart because the numbers actually get a little bit interesting when you do some compound annual growth rate. Okay, here we go. So if I look at the amount of taxes we need to raise, it appears to be 4.2% greater than the prior year. But if I do a comparison to from fiscal 20 to fiscal 22, the amount of taxes that we're looking to rate over the last 2 years is a 2.07% increase. The grand list looks to to have increased by 70 basis points. But the compound annual growth rate from 20 to 22 is 92 basis points. In addition, if I look at the mill rate is scheduled to increase by 3.12%. The compound annual growth rate, comparing the mill rate increase from fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 22, shows that our overall increase over the last 2 years is 1.9%. Significantly different numbers. And yes, it's because we had the anomaly and everybody looked to be conservative in what they were spending last year with trying to have a flat budget. But that's the story on the rate. Is there any additional discussion? Hearing none, are we ready to vote?
Jack,
I have. Yes. Jack, I'm waiting. Go ahead.
Yeah. First off, I want to thank you for your perspectives and observations. I find them very helpful for me in understanding the movement, the dynamics of the mill rate, and some very important points I think the public, anyone who has an interest, would find helpful as well. So I want to extend my appreciation for your comments and your hard work in all this. That's all.
I second that, Martha.
Here, here.
Here, here.
I appreciate it, but
That's right.
I believe F&B accomplished a lot during the year, and it's because we have a very good team. I will be, 2 years ago, when we finished the last of these, I asked the F&B committee to stand. Since I want to have at least a little humor in this budget, and being that we're all in blackout, I will be asking when we get done with item G, I will all be asking the F&B committee to stand and take a bow for their hard work, even though I guess nobody will actually see you other than your family and dogs and cats. But yeah, as I said, we need to have a little fun with this on occasion. So, that being said, do we have any no votes with the mill rate? Seeing or hearing none, do we have any abstentions? Seeing and hearing none, I guess this goes 14-0.
That's good.
Okay. Back to my big sheet. I need somebody to move item 20. 1, 11F, resolved that the town of Darien, acting through its Board of Selectmen and subject to the approval of said town, of the annual budget meeting of the town, representative town meeting held on May 10th, 2021, be authorized to borrow on the notes of the town the sum of $5 million or so much thereof as may be necessary for the general expenses of the town, pending the collection of either or both semi-annual installments of taxes on or prior to 30th, 2022. This is basically that we can issue tax anticipation notes if we end up having a shortage of people paying their funds. We have never had to issue it in contemplation that we might have had to use it last year, and actually at F&B's request, this number was moved, which it has consistently been at $5 million to $10 million. And since we didn't get the $10 million or any part thereof, it was determined to move it back down to $5 million. Not that it matters, because it doesn't cost us anything because we're not using it. So, can I have somebody move F?
I see Louisa and Lisa.
I have Iris. Okay. Thank you. Apparently I don't see everyone. Okay, is there any discussion on this? Jenny, are you having to abstain from this?
Yes, sir.
So we have one abstention. I can't imagine that anybody's going to vote against this. Surprise me. I've already been surprised tonight. All right, hearing none. 13 and one abstention. Okay, let me get back to my that's stupid. I was on at one point during the day. Okay, I need somebody to move 21 11G, which is the transfer to other appropriation to other accounts, including the sewer operation funds of $1,165,666, the sewer assessment fund, which we talked earlier about, that we've basically done a drawdown, and while it was typically at 500, it's now back down to what we expect to receive on an annual basis of 211,809. From the sewer capital accounts of 169,800, and from the parking lot administration fund 824,665, and the parking lot capital account, which is 278,632. All these funds are self-sustained, but the collection fees and others that they receive, they pay. So it costs nothing, but we still have to authorize the expenditure of these funds so that they can operate during the course of the year. That's the down and dirty on it. Is there any conversation or discussion on these? Hearing none, are we ready to vote?
We need to move in a second, right, Jack?
I guess we do, don't we? So I'm going to take Beth and Lee and Iris. I beat you to it, Stacy. Can
you repeat that, please? Could you repeat that?
Okay.
Who moved and who seconded?
And Iris will second it.
Got it.
Any conversation or discussion? Seeing none, I take it we're ready to vote. There's no abstentions. There's no no's. I take it this passes 14-0 unless somebody says that they disagree with that vote. Lastly, we have approval about minutes. Mike, a minute, because the minutes that are outstanding are from what meeting date?
April 12th. April 12th.
Well, it's been some time since we've met.
That's right. And I just two corrections. I want to note on page 2. It reads on page 2 in the middle paragraph in parentheses. It reads should be confused. It should read should not be confused. The word not. And in the second to last paragraph on the same page, it reads the expectation that the BOF acknowledges. It should be added there. It should acknowledge. That's the only two amendments I've had.
Thank you so much. Again, we're working on the veracity of our clerk in taking minutes, and if that didn't prove that he's very veracity, I don't know what else we can do. I want to thank you, Mike, for doing this. It is not an easy thing to do, and I greatly appreciate it. Do I have somebody moving to accept? Stacy, back to you.
Oh, you catch me off guard. Lisa and myself.
Okay. I don't count. One. I've lost total control. Are we ready to vote? You don't have to have had attendance to vote in favor of this. Do I have any no votes? Hearing none. Do I have any abstentions? Hearing none.